guys, my name is Megan and today I've got my top 15 favorite books of the year for you. Alright, so normally this video is my favorite and my least favorite books, but I figured I didn't actually have that many least favorite books and I only had like 4 DNFs this year. So I figured I would share my top 15 favorite books of the year with you guys. And it was so hard to narrow down to just 15 of my top favorites. And just a little reminder, before we get into my favorite books of the year, there will not be a video on the 24th, which is Christmas Eve, but I will see you on the next posting day, which I think is Friday. So let's go ahead and dive into my favorite books of the year. These are in no particular order of like favoritishness. The order of them is not important until we get to like the top 3. The first one I'd like to talk about is You Can Count on Me. This is a really cute holiday romance and it's just got all of the feels in it. And it's one that I'm currently reading as of the filming of this video and it's just really swoon-worthy and just really sweet. And honestly, I don't think that this favorite books of the year could get by without having a Faye Quinn book on the list. Next up is You're Not Supposed to Die Tonight. This was the only audiobook I read this year, but it was also such a fantastic read. Like the audio narrator just did so well and it felt like you were in a podcast and like right there with the characters. It was fantastic and it's an audiobook that I would highly recommend, especially if you're into like horror books and like slashers. This one is the one to go for. It's so good. Next up I have Vespertine, which was such like the fantasy book that I didn't know that I needed. It's got some little bit of like religious fantasy in there. Like it's about fantasy nuns that like fight demons and like this nun gets possessed by a revenant and the bickering and just Artemisia and the revenant together were like the dynamic duo that you didn't know that you needed. And I loved the bickering in this so much. It's one that I would highly recommend, especially if you're looking for something to read around Halloween or in the fall. This would be a perfect addition to a fall reading list. Next up I have the Breakaway series, which all 3 of these books had my heart in a vice grip and just would not let go the entire time. This is a contemporary queer hockey story and like the first 2 books are following the same couple, 3rd book is following somebody new, but like all 3 of these books had me in a chokehold and I almost cried through all 3 of the books and they were fantastic. Next up I have Proficiency Bonus. This was my favorite book out of the Roll for Love series. It has main character has ADHD and like the ADHD rep through the whole book was fantastic and it was so soft and fun and just really sweet. Next up I had That Time I Got Drunk and You Did a Love Potion at a Werewolf. This was so much fun. This is a high fantasy book that does not take itself too seriously and I was laughing and giggling the entire time. It's such a fun series and like who doesn't love a good monster romance? But yeah, Bree and Felix forever. So next up I have Lunatic, which is book 6 in the Necessary Evil series. This one is following Mac and Archer and they are definitely my favorite Necessary Evils pairing that I read this year. And definitely like, I love that they are so down bad for each other, but also they really like to just pick at each other and annoy each other. And like the annoyance to lovers in this is fantastic. And it's one that like the Necessary Evil series I would highly recommend. Please check trigger warnings before diving into the series though. Next up I have the Dragon's Betrothed Volume 2. Volume 2 was so good. The way that Shiharu and Ren are starting to fall in love and actually like delve into a relationship with each other. Fantastic. No notes. Loved it. And I would highly recommend this series, though it is not for those under 18. Okay, so next up I have Take a Hint, Dani Brown. Like Dani is one of my favorite characters of all time. She just like this whole story just like melted my heart and just like stuck with me all year. And Dani and Zephyr are just chef's kiss amazing. I love them. I think Dani is my favorite of the Brown sisters so far. Next up I have Icebreaker. This was one of my favorite hockey romances that I read this year and the depression rep in this as well as the bisexual rep and all of it is just fantastic and like this is definitely one that I'm going to reread next year. It's just such a good book and if you haven't read it yet, please do. It's fantastic and it's one that I could not recommend enough. All right, and then we're into my top 5 favorite books of the year. These ones actually are kind of in order, but like it's a loose order except for like my favorite book of the year. So next up we have King's Rising. This is definitely my favorite volume out of the Captive Prince series. This is the culmination of everything that Damon and Laurent have worked for, and like the way that they absolutely fall in love in this book is fantastic. Everything about this book series is so good. Highly recommend checking out the trigger warnings before diving into the series though, because this book series does get really, really heavy, like really quick. Next up is going to be The Covenant, Volume 1. So this series is following a bunch of priests who get powers from angels that they worship, and one of the main characters is having like a crisis of faith, and whether he believes in God, he believes in angels, but he's having issues with his faith, and like he also falls in love with a demon, and there's demon hunting, and just everything about this graphic novel was fantastic, and I'm really, really looking forward to Volume 2. Next up I have The Scratch Daughters. This was such a good book, and like the unhinged messiness of this coven of witches as they're trying to get Sideways' powers back is fantastic. And like if you love unhinged girl gangs that can do magic, this is the one to go for. It's super, super queer, and like these are girls that would kick your ass and just like keep going, and like they are fantastic and I love them. Next up is A Taste of Gold and Iron. This was one of my top favorite fantasy books that I read this year. It's following Cato as he is just trying to survive life at court. He is the crown prince, but like things just are going wrong every which way he turns, and just like it's messy, but also there's lots of political intrigue and drama, and just him falling in love with his guard or his bodyguard like very slowly, because like at first they don't like each other, but also like it's just a fantastic read, and it's one that I would highly recommend, especially if you're looking for a fantasy book that isn't quite traditional. This is one I would recommend. And then we're on to my favorite book of the year, my absolute #1 favorite, and that shouldn't really be any surprise to anybody that it's The Sunshine Court. This is probably one of the only books that I've reread it like 6 months after I read it the first time. And let me tell you, second read, I'm getting all of the little things that I missed the first read, and oh my god, I'm falling for this book even more. And I really can't wait for the second Sunshine Court book to come out, because like I know I'm gonna be crying over it. But yeah, the reading experience for this book just like grips you by the heart and just twists your heart and stomps on it and puts it back together and stomps on it again. Like the emotional roller coaster that this book was and is fantastic, and that's why it's my favorite book of the year. Alright guys, those are some of my favorite books of the year. Is there a book that you guys really absolutely loved this year? Let me know down below. If you guys like this video, don't forget the like button. If you haven't already but would like to, go and hit the subscribe button. And if you'd like to follow me on social media for more bookish stuff, check out the links down below. Alrighty, bye guys!